Hi everyone, it's Joe from A Little Slice of Wellness. I have with me today our first interviewee, David Simich from Dualist Psychology. How are you doing, Dave?
Very well, very well. Thanks for having me on board.
Thanks for kind of letting us use your wonderful, beautiful house for the kind of first interview. Now, I've got a couple of things in mind before we start.
Yeah.
Firstly, have you missed me?
I can't say that on camera. Oh, it's just, it's a bit much, I missed our time together.
Right.
Put it that way.
So breaking news, you've heard it first, Dave misses me. No, one of the things people have asked me, well, what's the first topic going to be? What's the first interview going to be, right? And believe it or not, I was having a shower and I thought about you. In a good way. So
that's how you want to start your first.
It's just downhill from here, Dave. Like it's just going to be complete downhill. I was kind of having a shower, and I think it was closer towards the end of the year, right? Last year, 2020, and I thought to myself, you know what? I've got to get myself into shape. This Christmas period, I've eaten a whole heap of mince pies. I've gorged myself on chips. I've done all these I've drunk alcohol. I've done all these things, and I really have to. I've got to do something about it now. And like a lot of people do, you make that kind of resolution, right? Like, okay, come 2021, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to eat well, exercise more, and I think for the first week or so in 2021, it went pretty well. I managed to regulate my eating, and then 4 packets of chips later, everything kind of went downhill. And I had initially thought about doing a thing on New Year's resolution, whereas I was going to speak and host it. And then I thought after the 4 packets of chips that I was probably the wrong person to speak about it. And then I kind of thought of you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
As I eat a chisel. Wasn't expecting. Can't eat and talk at the same time. So, Dave, before maybe we go any further, can you perhaps tell us a little bit about your experience and some of the work that you do in private practice?
Yeah, so I guess to sort of summarize in terms of what I sort of do is I incorporate both the physical aspect, which is the exercise and all those sort of things, and incorporate that with the psychology side of things as well. So the main goal, the main outcome that I have is basically to take a look at, what works in the long term, both in the physical side of things, but also in the psychological side of things, and mash these 2 things together. So what I've discovered is that there really is a lack of information in terms of the psychology when it comes to exercise and long-term weight maintenance. I guess the main goal is to feel better about ourselves.
It sounds like there's a difference between feeling better about yourself and also actually being healthier. Are they related? Are they separate?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because a lot of times people will think, okay, if I'm thin, then I'll be happier, right? If I lose a certain amount of kilos, then I'll be in better relationships. Or if I look a certain way, therefore I will be, I'll be popular. And, I suppose if you think about weight in general, you'll find people, for example, who do like bodybuilding competitions, they're at really low sort of body fat percentage, right? There could be like 3%, 4, 5% body fat percentage, even less. And, when you speak to some of them, sometimes they're not overly happy with their body either.
Good point.
They tend to, sometimes they look like, maybe I could have bigger arms or a bigger chest or what have you. Sometimes their relationships aren't going that well. So I guess a big part of this is being thin is a determinant of how happy you're going to be.
Yep.
And so while we think it might be something that might make us happy sort of in the long term, the effort it requires to get to that point is like super hard, right? So you're thinking about, okay, say if you want to be, that 3, 4 body fat percentage, and you'd be, full of muscles on muscles.
Kind of like me right now, like a peak
Yeah,
athlete.
and peak athlete,
muscular,
yes,
and
obviously,
of course,
yes,
of course. And now say it like you believe it. I'm gonna have another cheese.
Go for it. And so, to get to that level takes a lot of dedication, a lot of effort, right? So while in the outset you might be like, yes, I want the six pack, I want the big V tapered shape, I want all that sort of stuff. The process to get that could be completely miserable. So think, eating boiled chicken and broccoli, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about exercising twice a day, thinking about can't go out with friends and family because you're too busy worried about the calories that you're eating and the types of food you're eating. And so that whole process could make you absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
And so it's getting to change our thinking and behaviors and our perceptions around this sort of stuff.
But it was a bit miserable starting in the first place, right? Like, I can remember when I initially entered this journey of trying to get a little bit more fit. Of looking after myself. Well, in the beginning, it felt quite miserable because I had to do some of the things that you said. Like, I got to watch what I'm eating, how often I eat. Like, I've got to make sure that I stick to a schedule. So, at what point do you reckon that it reaches some sort of balance, or is that something that we should be striving for? And being aware that in the beginning it's going to be hard, but as you reach further towards your goal, it gets easier. Like, I'm uncertain how it works.
So when it comes to exercise in general, I suppose, it's never something that it's like, okay, you've done exercise for the rest of your life, you don't need to do anymore.
Yeah.
It's like a gold star, you get a certificate saying you've completed exercise for your life, congratulations, you don't need to do any more of that.
Now eat 4 packets of chips.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You'll be thin forever. Unfortunately, it doesn't sort of work like that. And a lot of it is about our perception of, wanting to be thin. Like, what are the reasons of wanting to be thin? A lot of it is about reevaluating some of our goals and what does being thin mean for you, right? Because sometimes those can be addressed in other kind of ways. Focused on being thin all the time can have its own sort of detriments, can be quite a constant plague on your mind sometimes in terms of how much to exercise, how much to eat. And then you often get suckered into, okay, well, what supplements can I have? And, how many calories are in certain things? And it can just be like an all-encompassing thing where that's all you think about is food and exercise.
And hearing what you're saying is, there is that difference between being thin or being muscly and being well. Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about, when we think about the health and wellness industry, sometimes it isn't necessarily all about health and wealth, right? For example, to have a six pack, that doesn't equate to better health outcomes. There's nothing wrong with wanting to look good. It's about how much time and effort does that take in your life.
Yeah. And it's very interesting that you say that, because whenever you see any, adverts about wellness and fitness and feeling good about yourself, you invariably either see a very good-looking, fit young woman who's skinny and who's exercising and who has a six-pack, or you might see this really handsome, muscular guy that's sweating and kind of running around, right? Yeah. And we have been brought up with these images that if you are muscly, if you are thin, then you'll be okay, you'll be well, right? You'll be healthy, and perhaps unsaid, you'll also be mentally healthy.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned before, there are a lot of athletes out there who still go through depression, who still go through anxiety. They have the six packs, they have the muscles, they have the regimented lifestyles. They eat boiled chicken, celery, and quinoa. Yeah. Every day, but they're still quite miserable. And it's really struck me how you've also mentioned that it's how we approach it in our minds. That thinking that we're skinny, or thinking that when we get skinny we'll be well, is something that would set us up for failure. in the future.
But it's also, I think it's even more than that, because a lot of the times, people equate, and it's sort of you said that, if you're thin, then you're kind of worthy.
Yeah.
Right? Worthy of love, worthy of attention, worthy of whatever, right? But you can attain all those things without putting yourself through that hell of trying to, going through that yo-yo dieting phase and the constant guilt and the shame and all that of like cycling through diets and all your different types of diets and all that. So there's a better way.
Speaking of which, what is the better way? Because like I told you, right? I was able to maintain some of that, some of those goals for a short period of time. I think a lot of people kind of like gel with this, right? They can try something, a new diet, a new way of living for a short period of time, and then invariably something happens and they kind of tend to give up.
Yeah.
So, like you spoke about a better way. What would be a better way to approach a situation like this, where it's the new year and I want a new me?
I think before we start in terms of what works, it might be worthwhile to take a look at and just have a bit of a chat about, why some of these things fail.
Yep.
Why do some of these diets that we're on, or why do some of the goals that we have for New Year's, why do they fail?
Mm-hmm.
I actually remember reading one study. There's not too many studies with them, but there was one study that said that, look, and it's about New Year's resolution goals and stuff like that. So
I'm getting nervous now because
so one study that they sort of found was that after 1 week of a resolution, 77% of people stuck to it after a week.
After a week. So after a week, 70 people still stop eating the cheesels and stick to their boiled chicken.
77%.
77%, sorry, yeah, 77%.
Yeah, gone. Yeah, I'm happy with that, right? But if we take a look in terms of longevity, so after 2 years, for example, there was only 19% stuck to it.
After 2 years, 19%. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So what we know is that, and there's a number of studies available that show that, having these New Year's resolutions sometimes may not be effective, because oftentimes we have high expectations, or if we're we go sort of full hog into it and don't have like any sort of realistic or achievable kind of goals. So those are some of the reasons, right? But in terms of why they fail, particularly within like diet and eating and exercise and all that sort of stuff, it's mainly around 4 different things. Right?
Okay.
One is where they think it's really easy. So it's around ease, right? So they think, it's going to be easy. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to have so much time to do it. All I need to do is do X amount of runs, or all I need to do is bench X amount of weight and I'll look like this, right? The thing is, what we know through exercise and diet, I suppose, and particularly with physique changing, is that it's not linear, right? There's no like, it's never like from point A to point B, right? You're going to have setbacks. Sometimes it'll be easy, sometimes it'll be difficult, sometimes you take a step back. So it becomes quite difficult. The other thing it's got to do with is speed, right? So somebody goes, right, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to lose 2 kilos a week. No dramas, consistently 2 kilos a week, and it'll be fine, right? I saw big people on the Biggest Loser.
Yeah.
Sometimes people in larger bodies, right? They lose a lot of weight quite quickly, and people tend to think, oh, I can do that. That's not a problem, without knowing the whole background behind it. Lots of flies around.
Yeah, that just kind of attacked me for some reason. Like, they must have smelt the cheesels on me.
And so, oftentimes, they think it will be quick, and when it doesn't, when it inevitably doesn't, they may change a different diet or go into a different things because it's not just working as quickly as what they thought it would be. Then we take a look at like the amounts, right? In terms of the amount of exercise that you need to do, the amount of tracking you need to do, just all that kind of stuff, right? And then lastly, it's more about the benefits.
Okay.
Right. So people think if they're thinner, they're going to be more well respected. They're going to be liked more. They're going to be, fitter, which may or may not be the case if you're thinner. Sometimes it can kind of work in reverse. Sometimes they think their relationships will go better, and that's not the case either. So having these 4 things, is a reason why sometimes this kind of diet kind of fails. And so it kind of works in a bit of a cycle, right? How it sort of pans out. So first and foremost, we start off with really sort of high, unrealistic expectations. Right?
Yeah.
Going, right, in about a month's time, I'm going to be shredded, right? I'm not even going to look at cheeseburgers, right? Or your favorite donuts, right? I'm not going to even.
I'm just going to put it there. I don't know. I do not know where Dave has come out about donuts. This is uncut. I felt there was a personal attack on my choice of food, Dave.
Well, I'm not saying you might still like donuts. Go for it.
Donuts are cool.
Donuts are cool. So what happens is when you have these unrealistic expectations, sometimes we have a commitment to change.
Yeah.
Right. We go, this is exactly what I'm going to do. And so we feel like a bit of control as part of that, right? So we do feel control going, okay, I've put this in place, I've written it down, I've joined the gym, I've done so many different things, I committed to this change, right? And then it kind of goes into your initial efforts, right? So with your initial efforts, you find some success, particularly with exercise. If you haven't done exercise before, you will find some kind of changes, right? Within the weightlifting industry, it's called noob gains.
Sorry, did you say nude?
No, noob.
Noob.
Yes.
Carry on.
So you'll find some kind of changes, particularly in the early stages.
Yeah.
And if it's an exercise you haven't done before, you'll find more changes with that. But then what happens is changes start to slow down, right? Because what happens sometimes is your body responds to change, right? So if you're losing a certain amount of weight, or if you're trying to build muscle, your bodies will try to compensate for that. So whether it lowers your hormone levels, or whether it makes you more hungry, or there's certain different things, whether you get like even bored of the exercise, or whether you get tired of eating the same thing, or tracking your calories or anything like that. So progress tends to slow after some time. And then what happens is it will come to a point where we sort of abandon what's been done.
Sure.
Right, what we do, because it's too difficult, not getting the results I want. And as a consequence of that, we place blame on ourselves. Right? Like we didn't do it better. We didn't do it hard enough, right? I didn't follow the diet exactly as it was prescribed, right?
A bit of self-blame, yeah?
A lot of blame and a lot of guilt associated with it. And oftentimes, when it comes to the diet industry, a lot of these things inherently don't work, right?
It's very interesting that you call it the diet industry.
Well, the diet and health and wellness sort of industry, where they talk about like going on these juice diets, or going on some of these kind of extreme kind of diets.
Which we will not mention due to copyright and legal issues.
And that they inherently just don't work, particularly in the long term. And so instead of understanding these don't work as a system, we sort of blame ourselves, going, we're sort of terrible for not following as strictly as I should be, right? And then you'll find something else, and then again you go back to that unrealistic expectations. So it's a bit of a cycle that goes through that process. And this is where like a lot of yo-yo dieting kind of comes in, is because there's all that sort of high expectations. It's going to go well. I'm gonna love it. It's going to be easy. I'm finding some results. Not finding that kind of good results anymore. Man, only if I stuck to it, like super strict, I'd be better. Oh, what's this new diet, right?
Yeah.
And you go through this process of trying different diets, trying different processes, and all the while we know this yo-yo process happens, we know your weight will still gradually increase.
It increases gradually, right? Okay.
So this yo-yo dieting makes your weight where you normally sit start to increase.
How come? I would have thought, right, like, okay, if I go from, say, X diet to X diet down here, that it's just like a quick, like a hop and skip over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm eating chicken today. Oh, that's not working for me. My chicken diet's not working for me. I'm gonna go on broccoli soup diet tomorrow, and that the body would just somehow adapt to it. But what you're saying is that it doesn't really adapt to it that well.
Yeah, so there's those changes and fluctuations. They're constantly going from different diet to diet, skipping from diet to diet. We have what's called a set point theory, which basically indicates that, you know, our body is naturally designed to go to a certain weight level.
Yep.
Right. Now, that can be changed as a consequence of the yo-yo dieting. So that set point can be higher if you yo-yo diet, right? Mm-hmm. So that can kind of change. Not by a lot, but sometimes it can change. Yo-yo dieting is actually more detrimental to your just well-being and both psychologically but physically too. Not only does your weight increase, also mentally you're going to be a lot more drained. Right? You're going to have a lot more guilt, and you're going to have a lot more preoccupation with food and so on and so forth. So you know, this is some of the reasons why we're trying to get away from some of those yo-yo dieting, because it can be worse for us.
What role does motivation play in this whole quest towards wellness, physical wellness and mental wellness?
Yeah. So motivation is quite a big sort of topic, and it's sort of big industry in terms of finding out, you know, how do we go to about motivating people. And so I'm going to summarize in terms of what motivation is, and I suppose how we can kind of utilize it. So first and foremost, motivation is something that gets you to it's like a driving force to get you to do the things that you kind of want to do, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to motivation, it works on a bit of a scale, right? From motivation, right? So what we know is on one end of the scale, it's not just you're either motivated or not, right? It works on a bit of a scale. Right. So on the one hand, you do have a motivation, which is not motivated at all. Okay. Right?
That's the lowest. That's the lowest.
That's the lowest you can kind of go.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah, that's the lowest you can kind of go.
Yeah.
Right.
That's me kind of eating cheezels in front of the TV.
Yeah.
Watching Netflix.
Well, look, it's just, you know, where there's no absolutely zero drive to do the thing, right? Zero drive to do the thing. And then on the other end, you've got what's called intrinsic motivation. Okay. Right? So intrinsic motivation is more about we're doing the exercise because it's part of our values and because we enjoy it, right? But within those two things, there's a whole bunch of other different types of motivation which may be better or worse, right? Depending on your goals. So the intrinsic motivation is very much for the long-term stuff.
Right. The
So
past the 2 years point.
Well, yeah, I suppose. Yeah. So, you know, if we're looking at long-term change, we want to try to get to this intrinsic level. Okay. Right? You know, you have in between, you have other sort of motivation types. So you've got like extrinsic motivation, which is, you know, motivated for if I go to the gym, then I can have a chocolate bar, right? So that could be a different type
Oh,
of motivation because it's rewarded, right?
Or kind of asking like, if I don't go to the gym, my personal trainer is going to beast me the next session, so I'm going to try to get there. So it's everything that's kind of external to yourself, basically, yeah?
Absolutely. So the chocolate bar is one, and then you go a step up, and that's that guilt, associated with it. Oh, I really should go, right? And so on and so forth.
Dave's going to look down at me if I don't.
I'll never look down on you. It's fine. So we want to try to get to this this higher level worth of motivation, right? And so we normally get that through three things. I'll summarize it just three things. Right?
Okay, cool.
One is what's called competence, right? So that basically means that you're comfortable doing the thing or doing the exercise, right? If we keep it in, in the exercise frame, because there's nothing worse going to a gym and not being comfortable with the machines, right? You see all these pulleys, you see all these really buff dudes come out, and it's like an intimidating place. It's like, okay, I'm not going to be here. I'm just not even going to associate with this. What do I even do with these machines? Like, I don't want to look like an idiot in front of these people, right? When it comes to competence, it's more about being comfortable doing the thing. And it's also about the level of how difficult it is.
Sure.
Because you don't want something that's too easy, because then it's boring. And otherwise, you don't want to do something that's super difficult because, well, you don't want to do it. You're gonna lose motivation.
Yeah,
it's just kind of, I hate doing this. Is way too difficult. What's the point?
It's kind of like that graded thing, right? Like if you go to the gym, if you go to do some exercise, you want to start at a certain level. You don't want to say, I'm going to go in and I'm going to start bench pressing 100 kilograms, or I'm going to go and run 10 kilometers, right?
Yeah.
You start somewhere that's manageable, and you start working your way up.
Exactly right. Yeah. So that's the first thing, competence. Being comfortable in doing the thing. The second thing has got to do with relatedness. So that's more around being comfortable with the group that you're in, right?
Okay.
And so you might identify as, for example, a runner, right? Like, yes, I'm a runner. I contact other runners and we go for a run together sometimes. Similarly with bicycles.
What's happening here? What is happening here?
Bicycles. But there's a lot of different types of gyms or places of exercise where they try to develop like a strong culture there, so people feel like they're part of a group, right? And so if we have a strong identity with that group, then we're more likely to do the thing, right? Whether it's a group activity or not, you can still be part of that sort of culture.
So it's a sense of belonging to something.
Yeah.
Belonging to a larger whole, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you find your people, effectively, right? And lastly, we take a look at autonomy, right? So autonomy is doing it because you want to, not because somebody is forcing you to do it, right? And that mainly consists of two things. One is, do you enjoy it, right? And does it align with my value system?
Okay.
Right? So what we know through exercise, that if you enjoy the exercise, you're about 21 times more likely to continue on a long-term basis with the exercise. Right? And so enjoyment is such a big thing. So if you can find exercise that you enjoy doing, stick with that, right? Continue with that, right? A big point is that, we could write you the best exercise plan to get your beef caked up and all that sort of stuff, right? But if you don't enjoy doing the thing, you're not going to stick to it. You're not going to like doing what you're doing. So it's more about finding what you enjoy and what suits you best, right? And then when we talk about values, we're looking at connecting with, what's important to you, right? What is central to your being? Is this something that's really, is health and fitness an important part to you? Or is it because, you want to get healthier to play with your kids? Or is it because You would like to lift X amount of weight because you feel stronger. These are all certain values that we kind of align with. And if we have all these three things, if we have the competence, if we have the autonomy, if we have the relatedness stuff, then that is a very good point of long-term sort of motivation.
So that's the thing that primarily contributes to the longevity of your kind of wellness plan, of your kind of, yeah, does make a lot of sense. Okay, so Dave, right? I've done my yo-yo dieting plan. I've eaten those 4 boxes of Cheezels in a week, and with that information in mind that you've just kind of shared with us, how do I then go about doing something differently? Like, is planning a big part of that motivation of success? Can I just go into it willy-nilly? You know what I mean? Like, just kind of like, okay, I'll just, Dave said that, I shouldn't be too regimented and structured. I'm just going to go throw caution to the wind. If I feel like doing an exercise today, I'll do it. And if I don't feel like, is planning a big part of it?
Yeah, I mean, planning is quite a big part of, setting goals. And there's always going to be a big thing to it. So we know just through standard, psychological stuff, we talk about the SMART goals. Making sure that they're specific, measurable, achievable,
realistic,
and timely.
That's right. Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. See, we're professionals before. We've done this before.
So, those are some things to sort of focus on when we're looking at sort of creating goals and going through each of those sort of steps to make sure that what you're doing is in line, right? Mm-hmm. But a lot of that can be driven by your value system.
Sure.
So what do you find important? Like, what's to take a bit of a look inside yourself to go, right, this is important to me. And I guess, one of the questions we sort of ask and to try to elicit some of that sort of value stuff is to think about, okay, if you're at if you're at your 80th birthday, what would you hope they would say, right? And so, that can be a bit of a starting point to think about, okay, these are some of the values that I hold. And so we want to also gravitate away from weight-specific goals sometimes.
Are you talking about like not weight-specific goals, but about your own
body weight?
So you're talking about like, I want to reach 80 kilograms by X kind of day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, it's a big thing to say, because that's kind of like what a lot of people do.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to reach even doctors will say that you need to go and drop 5 kilograms. In my case, you need to drop 20. And you need to get at that specific spot. And what you're saying is it sounds like that's unhelpful.
I mean, it can be, because a lot of times we're focused on like the numbers of themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And we can be sort of all encompassing by those numbers. And sometimes those numbers can be quite inaccurate, particularly if you're just using the scales.
Sure.
Because you don't know what your bone density is, you don't know what your muscle mass is, you don't know your body fat percentage, that sort of stuff. What might be like a good way of thinking about it is more about kind of whole body or whole person goals, right?
Okay.
So what do you hope to achieve? I mean, being thin might be a goal, but what's the point of that? Like, is it because you want to be able to play with your kids? Is it because you're looking, do you want to be able to achieve a certain strength test or be able to run a certain distance? Or so we're looking at, instead of just losing the weight, what other goals do we have that can kind of incorporate some of this exercise stuff?
Yeah.
Right. So, we often talk about, if you're looking to be, to do well in a particular kind of exercise or a sport, you need certain foods for that, you need certain training regimes, all that sort of stuff.
Can you confirm or deny a conversation that we had about a year back where you told me that jelly babies are a good thing to eat before you have a run? because I have stuck to that advice, Dave, religiously.
Okay, so this is where the physiological stuff comes in, right? The physical stuff, right?
Yeah.
So what we know is that certain sugars, so if we think about things like potentially jelly babies or like certain types of lollies, right?
I'm just getting excited. I don't know why.
So this is typically used in conjunction with creatine.
Okay,
Right.
right, yeah.
So the idea behind it is that these sugars will help with the absorption of creatine and then the absorption of proteins, and so you could be able to it'd be more effective and more way of pumping up the muscle more.
I knew it.
So that can kind of help, but it also depends on how much you're eating. So, if you're having like a kilo bag, like that's where you kind of go, oh, you're kind of eating a bit too much.
Well, why did you look at me when you said a kilo bag?
Am I wrong? Would it be a kilo bag?
Let's maybe move to a different question right now. I do not like where this is going, Dave. So, what are your thoughts about the connection between exercise, being fit, right, and our mental health? Very, very often with my clients, I have, mentioned them, look, you need to have a better lifestyle balance, right? So, you work in an office all day. How much exercise are you getting? Are you getting your heart rate up? Are you going out there? Because I have found personally a lot of benefits from exercise. I went from not being able to run or even jog 50 meters to being able to run 10 kilometers at a stretch. And that's a really big thing for me. And it makes a lot of sense what you've said before, right? I enjoy that. That's a benchmark that I've put myself, and it gives me motivation to want to, set my sights on higher goals. But like intrinsically, how does being fit affect someone's mental health?
It's not so much being fit. I think it's just the act of exercise in of itself helps with mental health. So we know, when it comes to exercise, people just automatically assume that it's great for weight loss, right? I would argue that it's actually exercise is far more beneficial in terms of how our body functions and how our mind functions.
Sure.
Right. So we know that exercise can help with a whole host of physical ailments, like it can prevent like heart disease, it can help with strengthening of muscles, it can help with even things like Alzheimer's. There's so many benefits to exercise, both physically and mentally. And I remember watching one documentary, and it was about like the benefits of exercise, and I can't recall which one it is. But they were saying, look, if we could put the benefits of exercise into a pill, we'd give it to everybody.
Sure.
Right? Because it's just the benefits, if we take away the weight loss stuff, the benefits just on just daily functioning is heaps. There's so much to it, right? Both mentally and physically. So we know, for example, I've talked a bit about the physical stuff, but mentally, we know that exercise can be just as effective as antidepressants sometimes.
Sure.
So incorporating exercise into just your general lifestyle is hugely important.
I'm not suggesting that exercise is the only medicine or the only thing that works with depression, because depression and anxiety, they're very complex conditions, right? But in general, it is that advice that going out and exercising, getting that fresh air, acting, belonging, committing, that is what contributes to wellness and mental health, and not necessarily the exercise in and of itself. It's a whole system thing.
Absolutely. I mean, when we think about what exercise does for us mentally, it releases a whole bunch of hormones and happy chemicals in our brains. And people talk about, particularly distance runners or what have you, talk about a state of flow where nothing else kind of seems to matter, and they're just loving it. They're just on a runner's high and just sort of keep going. Much in the same way as at a gym, right? Like all you're thinking about is doing the extra rep, doing the extra thing, and you're not really thinking about anything else. So that gives us time to disconnect from some of the difficulties or thoughts that we've got that's plaguing us a little bit. So it gives us time to rejuvenate in that aspect.
Dave, you've keep going. Yeah, chew on it. Is that releasing a few feel-good chemicals right now, Dave?
Oh, tasty.
Yeah, it is.
Good.
Yeah, talking about me? Sorry, I thought you were talking the Cheezels. My bad. So, Dave, thank you very much for having a chat with us today. Yeah, first podcast on my channel, so yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks,
No worries.
buddy.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.